Hey folks, this is Paul. Here to kind of walk you through the Lorenzo Walker Technical College lesson plan template that I've made. It may be different than something that you're using currently, but different teachers are saying that it's helping them plan pretty well. It's not that different than other lesson plan templates. It's just I've tried to pay close attention to the components of the FTEM or focused teacher evaluation model elements, and this kind of gets at all the different pieces. So you first off start with the kind of the topic and the learning goals. Here you would paste in the standards from your curriculum framework. Here's where you think about how challenging it is. It could be a word or two. It could be a whole sentence where you just have a moment to think like, is this going to be a tough lesson or is it going to be kind of easy? Is it both? Does it start easy and get harder, etc.? That kind of helps you think about it from their perspective. In the official language for this is the success criteria, but I've tried to put all these, education-ese style terms into like normal questions. So how I know that my students have learned what I expect them to. They'll do this or they can do that. They can do this. If they can do these things, I will know that they've learned what I expect them to. Here's where you would probably choose one of these that fits the lesson that you're doing. And of course, where we teach, a lesson might be more than one day. It could be a whole week-long lesson. Could be more than a week even. So you might introduce new content and then start to deepen it and then get to a cognitively complex task. You might do all three of these in one lesson. Or it might be starting off at deepening because you've already kind of introduced it at some other point. Here's where you would list vocab terms. And I think it's no matter what you teach, it's really important to think about the vocabulary that's specific to your content, your program, your classes. And then here is something that most of us don't really think about in our planning is not just what are the words, but what kind of activity are my students going to engage in order to practice with these words. And the good thing we live in the age of the internet. There's like a gazillion activities involving vocabulary out there on the World Wide Web. I've got tons of documents saved in my files, but suffice it to say, you could plan 1, 2, or even 3 different structured activities that your students could do in order to start to own these terms. All right, now we get into the heart of the lesson. So I've divided these into chunks. I basically made 4 of these. That is kind of a random number. There might only be 1 or 2 sections, if you will, of your lesson or parts of it, or there might be way more than 4. I just put 4 there, and you can see the note here, not all lesson chunk tables are required. Okay, so here's how it works. So let's say the first activity is 20 minutes long, okay, where you're introducing something. So what are they doing? The students. What tools or resources are needed? So they're going to do this, and they need these materials in order to accomplish it. How will I, the teacher, know that they got it? Here's how I know that they got it, which relates back to one of these maybe. How will I monitor student progress? So this is that important piece. So not only are they engaged in the work, but I, as a teacher, I'm engaged in making sure that they're on track. Here's a piece that very few of us think about when we're planning a lesson is what if it starts to bomb? What if the tech fails, the internet doesn't work, or the software is not working, or the tools that I've set aside for this aren't working properly? What's my plan B? That's a pretty good thing to plan for. It's kind of like, how do they, like at NASA, they have all these kind of plan B and plan C things already thought through as much as possible. And then teaming. How are you grouping students to do this particular? It could be you're not teaming them up. They're just doing individual stuff, or it could be that you've got them in certain groups for a certain reason. And then you kind of go on to the next activity. What are they doing next? Do they need different tools or resources? How are you going to know that they're doing well with this part of the lesson? How are you going to monitor? What if this part starts to go wrong? Do you need to reteach? That kind of thing. And is the teaming any different? And so you just kind of think through all the different parts of your lesson, and odds are you're going to have a lesson that's planned pretty darn well. The last 2 pages of this are going to be a little bit different. Here's where, you may have heard this term differentiated instruction. You've got most students here in the middle, and it says leave this column blank. So most of your students in general tend to be pretty much on par. They're right with you. They stay on pace, and they're learning the stuff that they need to be learning. But you also have some strugglers, and you have some rock stars, right? Your strugglers are students who have skills or knowledge gaps. They might have reasons that they're usually behind. They might have a learning disability. They might have a language issue where English isn't their first language, etc. So you write their names here. You think about them. You're planning ahead, thinking, you know what, so and so usually just struggles for whatever reason. And then you think through, okay, so what you write here is, here's what I'm going to do for this student in order to make sure that he or she can stay with these students, right? So this student might need an extra handout that I can find or make for them, or they might need to buddy up with somebody, or, there's all kinds of things you can do to get them up to speed. And then you've got your rock stars who are they're always doing well, and they kind of finish early, and they're kind of getting bored, and they need more of a challenge. So you write their names here, and then you think through well, how can I push them to their next level? And maybe these students, these rock stars, can be helping these strugglers, or they might be leaders of groups, or you might come up with something entirely new for them that challenges them in a different way. So that's this page. And then the last page is a performance scale specific to the learning target. So recently across the country, it's been a trend for students to kind of say, well, I'm at a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 right now, as far as, whether I understand something. But that's generic. And so what this is, it's specific to the learning target. Meaning, when you said, these are the learning goals, these standards, this is what they're doing, well, that goes here. Okay, so you can see the asterisk next to the 3. So the 3 is the learning target. So, for example, in Marine Service Technologies, that program, that course, this is one of the standards. They need to rebuild a power transmission. So that is right here at level 3. If they're on grade level, they're at 3, right? So if they're almost there, they can probably describe specific terminology that's relevant to rebuilding a power transmission. So these terms borrowed from here, right, where you listed your vocab, they can probably show you that they're familiar with these, and they can even describe and talk about them. And they can do a couple of things, but they can't do the thing. Does that make sense? They can't do at grade level, at the standard level that they need to. They can do some things. They can talk about the vocab. So there's no major errors or omissions regarding the simpler details and processes, but major errors or omissions regarding the more complex ideas and processes involved in the standard. Now, your rock stars at level 4 can go beyond instruction, and they can do some other stuff, okay? So this is blank in that you don't have to change anything in the 0 column. You don't have to change anything in the 1 column. In the 2 column, you would write your vocab here, like is done here. And then bulleted would be, here's the stuff they can do, but they can't do the actual standard at the level they need to do it at. And then in level 4, you would just write a couple of things that your rock stars can do beyond the standard. So ideally, your students would have a copy of this scale, right? Or this would be posted on the whiteboard, and students would have the ability to kind of go, okay, this is what I'm supposed to learn. At level 3, I'm supposed to be able to rebuild a power transmission. Can I do that successfully? If not, am I at 0, 1, or 2? And if I can I do this other stuff at level 4? And that way they have kind of ownership of tracking their own progress. So that's it. That's the last page. So again, this covers a lot of the same stuff that other lesson plan templates do, but it is very specific to the components involved in FTEM, the Focused Teacher Evaluation Model, and I've tried my best to use language that is kind of like simple everyday language, and forming questions that you would answer as a teacher to help you think through the lesson as best you can. So if you want to talk about it or you want to see some examples, let me know. All right. Cheers.